Profiles. I'm Charley Walters. My guest today is Alicia Carney. Since beginning of January 2021, she's been the Interim Executive Director of the Dreamland. It's a big job, and it's especially a big job during a pandemic. Before we get started, I just want to, in the interest of full disclosure, mention that I sit on the board of directors of the Dreamland, and I co-program with Josh Gray the series Film for Thought, and I've also put together a couple of series of my own. Alicia, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
And let's begin with having you tell us what is and what isn't happening at the Dreamland as we speak.
So the Dreamland is back open for films. We are opening on Fridays and Saturdays. 2 screenings at this time on both Fridays and Saturdays, and we're working with the studios for all new content and showing that to the Nantucket community.
Let me stop you there. All the movies that are being shown are on the big screen, is that correct?
They are. They're all in the main theater, and we've worked with our software solution to be able to socially distance patrons. So when you come into the theater, you have reserved seating, and you'll have a fixed amount of space around you and your group.
Now, the capacity of the big theater, the downstairs theater, is, I believe, 314, and you're allowing 50 people in. But I think what the Governor Baker has said is that you can have up to 25% of your capacity in the building should you so desire. So that would be 77 people or whatever. Dreamland's being very cautious about this by having just 50 in. Can you talk about how you came to that decision?
Certainly. So the governor has a separate set of rules for movie theater operations. And one of the requests is no more than 50, but or 25% of your capacity limit. So we felt that that 50 number is the absolute maximum for our main theater, both with state regulations and also for the capacity that we have. And sometimes that number varies, and it's actually less depending on how many groups come in and what the spacing requirements are around the groups. So the spacing is the preference for available tickets.
So you might have one person coming in, you might have 5, 6 or more people coming in. So there's a bit of a dance you have to do just before showtime to make sure that everyone is socially distanced.
That's correct. And so when you as a ticket holder will come into the theater, you'll notice that the row in front of you, the row behind you are empty, and 3 seats to your left and 3 seats to your right are also empty.
Are you using the entire floor area of the big theater, or have you blocked off the seats that taper up to there or ramped up to the ceiling?
We are using the full theater, both the lower and the upper section, and our software that reserves the seating is booking socially distanced seats for patrons when they come into the theater.
Now, are there any other live events going on in the building at this point?
They are the only live events going on at Dreamland at this point in person.
But there is a concert series that is pre-taped. Talk about that. You've done, or there have been 3 broadcasts so far. How many more are there? Who's involved?
So we have our Dreamland Live Session series, which is showcased every Monday. It is featuring our musicians, our local musicians in the Nantucket community. Every week, they're interviewed by our film programmer and director of marketing communications, Josh Gray. And it's about a 15-minute segment, and we have 10 episodes that we're premiering this season.
And those are recorded on the stage where the screen is in the big room, as I call it.
They are. There's a couple of different venues that we've used this season, as you'll see with the different broadcasts, but we are primarily focused in the main theater.
And stage productions, Laura Gallagher Byrne, that's on hiatus, obviously, for obvious reasons. Special events. You know a lot about that because you've worked on that part of the Dreamland. At this point, are you even making reservations for the summer?
We're having conversations about what's happening this summer. it's really hard to say what the gathering limits and whether we'll be able to safely gather in person this summer. So what we're strategizing is a way to continue with our productions, but broadcast them in a virtual way that people can still enjoy.
And I think it's safe to say that there will be a gala, but it may or may not be in the building, correct?
That's correct. We innovated our way through our fundraiser last year. We had probably 3 different concepts, and we ended up producing a really fun in-person drive-in film experience last summer, and it looks like we'll be doing something very similar this July.
Now, aside from the live events that are happening and or not happening in the building, what is going on in the building these days? Do you spend most of your work time in the building or at home?
A combination of both. A lot of my time is spent in meetings, and I'm also there every weekend. So when we open the building on Fridays and Saturdays, you're going to see our administrative team, those that you've spoken with over the phone and in meetings, and through both theater and marketing and other avenues. But our team is pulled together, and we're the ones greeting our patrons and welcoming them back into the theaters.
Now, your staff at this point is about how big?
Quite small, actually.
Of course.
We have five different staff members.
And that would have been what, 8 or 9 before all this began?
Yes.
Well, it's good that you have that many when you think about it, because there's so little going on performance-wise or presentation-wise in the theater. It's good that those 5 people still have jobs to go to every week.
That's our core team, and our other 2 staff members are part-time, and that's worked out well. And one of them has been with us over the years since 2012 when the theater opened, and he focuses mostly on our projection, and then of course our bookkeeping side of things. So it is nice at a time like this, especially where so many theaters are impacted and closing, that our team does have stable employment.
Now, pandemic or no pandemic, as interim executive director, there are a lot of things you're responsible for day in and day out. I mean, some of them are obvious, overseeing operations of what films get performed and so on. But I've always had the impression that a lot of people think that an ED, an executive director, sits at a conference table all day long and has a 2-martini lunch and so on and so forth. That's obviously not it. So what do you do? Because you're responsible for everything from being in charge of the staff to making sure that all the windows are locked and the doorknobs work and everything. There's not much that either you have to take care of personally or make sure that somebody else is taking care of.
It's true, and there really is nothing that I don't do. To be honest, I'm very hands-on in my management style, and as an executive director and an interim executive director, it's really important to make sure that our donors and our members and our stakeholders, our patrons, are all being serviced and taken great care of. And that's what I'm trying to focus on and balance, is getting us through this pandemic in the most fiscally responsible way that we can and know how, and looking at every opportunity we have to program the Dreamland in a way that aligns with our mission, but also shows the community that our doors are open. We are here for you.
Let me take a break and go back in time for a few minutes. You did not grow up on Nantucket, but you did grow up in Massachusetts in a place that has some things in common with Nantucket. Tell us about that.
I did. So I was born in Boston and raised on the South Shore. I attended high school in a small little beach community of 82 people in my graduating class. So my family is still located there now. That's Nantucket Beach. And it's a peninsula. So we're very used to a tourism-based economy. We're very used to an influx of 40,000 people in the summer coming to their summer homes. So Nantucket's not that different for me.
I know I was a little boy growing up outside of Boston, and I started to come to Nantucket when I was 8. And one of the first things I was aware of is a lot of people thought Nantucket was Nantasket. They didn't get it that Nantucket was an island 100 miles away from Nantasket Beach. but this is Hull, Massachusetts we're talking about. And it's interesting to look at Hull on a map because it's a peninsula that sticks way out into Boston Harbor, and it's very, very narrow. I think there are a couple of causeways, aren't there?
There are, and it certainly will. They're basically islands in themselves, including, especially where I live toward the end of the town near Allerton Hill.
Now, where did you go to school? What did you major in, et cetera?
So I attended the University of Vermont School of Business. I studied global business and business administration, and I'm currently enrolled in Harvard University as well, pursuing continuing education.
Let's dig a little deeper on that because, first of all, had you been to Nantucket before you started to work at the Dreamland?
Oh yes. So I grew up visiting Nantucket with my grandparents. It was my grandfather's favorite place to come. He introduced my grandmother, this is my father's parents, introduced my grandmother to the island, and the rest is history. He used to fly over here for lunch and go to the Brotherhood of Thieves, and it was just his favorite place, you know, his afternoon with his friends flying out of Marshfield, Mass. And I've been coming here since I was 2 years old, and we would stay in Brant Point, and I have memories as a child every May coming to Nantucket. It was the vacation I looked forward to, and as I grew up, I would then start looking forward to Daffodil Weekend and Stroll Weekend and the different festivities that Nantucket did, and you know, with family and friends over the years, coming back to the island was a very special thing to me.
Your grandfather used to fly over for lunch. I hope he had his own plane.
He did. He had a lot of varied interests. But one of them was flying, and he did it for fun. And he bought this tiny little plane, and he would try to find friends to fly over with to have lunch for the afternoon. And he was always adventuring all around the world, and it was a special thing for him.
Now, when you were applying for jobs, and you've been at Dreamland for what, 4 years? Is that correct?
Just about. I joined the Dreamland team in May 2017.
Okay. Obviously, you were applying your business background, but I'm wondering how much was the job and how much was Nantucket in your thinking at that point?
Well, it was 100% Nantucket, and the job just appeared. Truly, it was serendipitous in so many ways. I was visiting the island, and I had met somebody, and I had been looking for 2 years for the right opportunity that would match my background and skill set. I was at Yale University prior to the Dreamland, and it needed to be the right move in order to leave Yale. It was a very secure and engaging position I had there, and this opportunity presented itself with the Dreamland, and I met Joe Hale, and everything just fell into place, and it was the right time, and it was the right position, and it's been an incredible experience.
Talk about your job experience before you came to the Dreamland. What sorts of things were you doing and where were they? You mentioned Yale, but what else?
So I worked with, I really followed the hospitality and business track throughout my career. I've worked my whole life, all through school. And I did a lot of varied things. When I was in high school, I would work with a local campaign helping a state representative get reelected. I helped as an office assistant at a law firm as well on the South Shore. And then I spent a lot of time throughout college working with the dean's office at the School of Business, networking my way through different opportunities, different internships. And from there, I moved to Block Island, Rhode Island, actually, and I was working with 2 different hotels out there for 3 different summer seasons. And from there, I pivoted into Omni Hotels and Resorts, and I focused on food and beverage, the food and beverage department. I was sent out on various task force assignments. I worked in New York City and Midtown Manhattan for a period of time. But I was primarily in New Haven, Connecticut, unless they were sending me out on other assignments to troubleshoot operations, help open hotels. And from there, I was recruited by Yale.
I'm seeing a through line in some of these occupations, beachside communities, 2 islands, or 3 if you want to include Manhattan, yeah. Which actually is half the size of Nantucket in the area. You've obviously got the sea in your veins. having grown up so close to the water. I mean, Hull is, you can't get away from the water in Hull. I mean, it's a very, very narrow peninsula.
And we're three houses from the water in Hull. So when I go to the top floor of my grandmother's house, for example, my grandmother and father live across the street from each other. And I can see the bay on one side and the ocean on the other. And you hear the ocean going to sleep at night. So it's something that's been part of the makeup of who I am.
And you're just a few miles from downtown Boston. I mean, in some ways, it's a million miles away. How far above sea level were you when you were growing up?
Well, anytime it was high tide, the water would come down our street. So I'd stay pretty close.
Really, anytime, really?
Over the years, I mean, we've obviously seen that rise steadily over the years, but I can remember back in 1992 when we had, I want to say, was it Hurricane Bob or one of those storms? There were people on boogie boards going down, I live in the Alphabet Streets, my family's on the Alphabet Streets, and they would be going right down the street, just floating along because it was fun. We would go to the beach during a hurricane when it was pretty mild, but the water was warm, and I would have all my cousins there, and we were swimming. We were braving out the storm. So I have a very different feeling about hurricanes and storms. I love them. I'm a sailor. I grew up sailing and racing competitively. So bring on the foul weather.
And now you're working in a building that is just a street width away from Nantucket Harbor. So in a way, you're still at home. I want to go deeper into what you were studying at business school, because not everybody will study the same things at business school. So can you get a little more specific about what courses you were studying?
Sure. So business administration really was my focus, and what business administration, as we know, touches in everything from finance to marketing to hiring practices to you name it. When I decided to focus my major in global business, one of the areas that was really interesting to me was international business and international relations. There was a period of time where I felt I wanted to pursue international business as a corporate lawyer. So I always wanted to travel. I love business. Everything I read is business related. Everything I do in my volunteer time is business related. But I had a well-rounded academic experience at the University of Vermont's Business School, and just sort of tried to pursue coursework that was interesting to me. Another area was management and organizational behavior and organizational psychology. So when you're leading teams, looking at team dynamics, how people are motivated, managing multiple generations in the workplace, responsible financial management, all areas that I chose to focus on.
Not having a business background, at least as far as education goes, it seems that what you studied was tailor-made for the kind of job you have right now. Is that a fair statement?
I think so. I always think back to high school and what I was thinking, pursuing only business schools for my undergrad. I didn't want to go to a liberal arts college. I wanted to be sure I was at a really good business school. And what I liked about UVM was their focus in sustainability, their focus in women in business, their focus on community. And Burlington, Vermont is very centered around the arts. It's a very lively place to go to college, to experience, that period of your life. Between the live music, the artists, the musical talent that's up there, I felt it just made a lot of sense.
It sounds a little bit like Nantucket in a way. I mean, obviously it's not the same thing, but there's certain commonalities there, to my way of thinking. Let's talk about the future as best we can. I mean, nobody knows when this is going to end, how much worse it's going to get before it does end. So you're obviously limited on what you can do. On the other hand, you have to have some kind of plan in place. So as you look ahead over the next few months, do you have a whole bunch of different scenarios that you can plug in depending on what the governor says or how bad the pandemic gets?
We do. Our team works really hard. Bi-weekly, we're focusing on our strategic planning, which really lays out what the future of film, what the future of theater, and what the future of live events look like for the Dreamland. And we're taking it a week or 2 weeks at a time and just looking at How soon can we build out the programming that we do have? How soon can we invite camps and children and families back into the building? How soon can we produce programming, live programming with a limited audience? For example, storytelling is a great example. We did that around Stroll, and we had Bonnie Levinson, who works with the Moth, coach our storytellers, and we had just the storytellers in the audience. The day before, each of them brought a guest, but because we were facing such a serious spike in the surge of COVID, we had to limit how many people were in the theater for the filming, and that filming was then broadcast, so it felt like a live experience for people. And we had a lot of great feedback and a lot of people tuning in, but that's the sort of innovation we are in strategy that we're focusing on at the Dreamland, and that's how I think we're going to, and a lot of performing arts organizations are going to navigate and pivot their way out of this.
Now, when people are going to a film right now, they're all wearing masks. They have to wear masks. Is that correct? Yeah. Now, for the concert series, obviously the person singing is not wearing a mask. And when I've seen Josh interviewing that person, he's not wearing a mask either, although they are socially distanced. But is everybody else in the room, all the tech people, are they all wearing masks?
They are wearing masks. And it's important to remember it's masks and social distancing and hand washing. And there's so many factors that we have to make sure that we're upholding to keep people safe, and which we're following every bit of advice from the CDC.
Now, I know some businesses, not necessarily on Nantucket, in fact, I don't know of any on Nantucket, but some are taking it a few steps further and saying, well, you have to prove that you've had a vaccination, or they'll have one of those devices, I don't even know what they're called, but you stick your face in front of a screen and it tells you what your temperature is. Those seem extreme, but obviously Dreamland is not doing them as we speak. But is that the sort of thing you talk about in your meetings?
Well, I can actually say, so part of our strategy in reopening and how we felt we could reopen safely, there's a new process when you come into the Dreamland. And one of those does involve a wall-mounted temperature thermometer reader.
You know, when I was last in the Dreamland building.
Yes. Well, and this is, so we opened January 8th, and we had all of, with plexiglass, which is securing those who are behind the counter at the box office. But as of a couple of weeks ago, we've had the temperature, wall-mounted temperature check in place. You'll see me when you come in the doors at the Dreamland. I'm the one directing you to take your temperature. And for the younger ones, or for those who can't reach the wall-mounted temperature, I have a temperature monitor, a portable one. So people are coming into the Dreamland. They're asked to have their QR codes and electronic tickets ready in hand, because that's also something either myself or the greeter who's welcoming people back into the theater is scanning. Next step would be the temperature check, and then they're ordering with concessions. Behind plexiglass, we have 4 by 6 foot pieces of plexiglass, which have completely walled off our concession area. And then there's one-way traffic in and one-way traffic out of our main theater on the first floor.
I haven't been in the Dreamland building, as I said, for a while, but I have been in a building where they have those temperature devices set up, and they are really very simple and very, very fast. So I hope people don't get scared away by the fact that they have to have their temperature taken, because it will have been taken before you know it.
There's an added level of comfort for people, especially the general public. Yeah. And I'm a big advocate of this. There are a lot of people that are taking necessary precautions, that are healthy, that are not sick, that those are the people that I want to know, we're here for you. The Dreamland is here for you. And if you are not sick and you still would like to go out and watch a movie or get out of your house, or do something outside of the routine that we've all found in our lives since March, that's exactly what the Dreamland's goal is, to provide a safe environment for people to enjoy entertainment again.
How are you handling restrooms?
So we have door stops, so you do not need to touch the doors any longer. People, as they enter and exit, they use a foot stop that they pull open with their shoe. The restrooms are sanitized between each use. The theaters are sanitized between each use. I have I've purchased. You'll see a video being released on our social media of an antibacterial spraying gun that we have, and it has UV light technology. So after each screening, our team is going into the theater and we're spraying every row and then hand wiping down with antibacterial hand wipes as well, alcohol wipes, the armrests, the cup holders, throughout the theater and restrooms. So there's not only the spray, which is hospital grade spray that is disinfecting the entire area, but we're also paying very close attention to high touch areas. The faucets in the Dreamland have no handles; those are all automatic. And like I said before, we're taking people's health very, very seriously.
Is there a maximum capacity for each restroom?
There are multiple stalls in each restroom, and one person at a time are able to go in. With the audience numbers we've been seeing, we'll see maybe 10 or 12 people per screening. The most we've had so far has been 15 people for a screening. So people have been very conscious of when they're utilizing the bathroom and also whether they're utilizing the public restroom. It's a matter of comfort for our patrons who are coming in. And I think it's because the numbers will never exceed 50 until the governor or the state of Massachusetts changes that. It's a very slow trickle flow, if you will, of people in the theater using the restrooms, using concessions, et cetera.
Let me ask you a hypothetical, which I hate to do, but I'm just trying to get a grip on the situation where everyone is in. If we're in the same situation in June as we are now, even if we are, there will still be a lot more people on the island than there are right now. Would the other two screens be open in consideration of the fact that there are more people? Or is the situation right now dire enough that if it's still that way in June, there would still be just the one screen?
Monitoring it closely, but my thought is if it's still the way it is now in June, we'll still be operating the way we're operating now with the one screen.
Just the one screen with, say, 50 people.
Yes.
You must have to monitor what's coming out of the governor's office every day because it really is a moving target.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we are monitoring this closely. I know all businesses on Nantucket are monitoring this very closely. And we're doing everything we can to operate within the parameters that are set forth for business guidelines. And my philosophy is, if we can be open, we are going to be open, and we're going to do it in a safe manner that is ensuring the future of our organization.
Safety above all. Since you grew up in a waterfront community and are working practically in the harbor, I want to touch on rising seas. Obviously, nobody knows how much they're going to rise or how quickly they're going to rise, but it has to be a concern day in and day out when you're working in a building that begins at street level and is one block away from the Easy Street inlet, if you will. How, is this a constant, as if there is not enough to worry about during a pandemic? Is the rising sea situation a constant topic of discussion?
I think for the island, it certainly is. And for our team, we're doing everything we can to avoid flooding, especially in the back of the building. Fortunately, there's open space in the back of the building, so we don't have too much to worry about, but we take all precautions as we see that sea level rise. I mean, there have been times where our team has gone out behind the building and there's 3 feet of water, and some of us are parked behind the building and we're getting phone calls from Nantucket Police Department to move our Jeeps because the water's halfway up the wheel well. So it's certainly something you have to be conscious of. You have to be conscious of the tides. You have to be conscious of whether it's a full moon or not, because there are moon tides, and any storms that are coming in. We're doing, like all businesses in the downtown district, we're doing everything we can to do our part and monitor for keeping our assets safe.
I think if you go back a few hundred years, you would see that, from what I've been told, Federal Street was the edge of the harbor. and there was a bit of a drop down, as there still is, but it was a very reedy area, like out in the creeks, which means, of course, that South Water Street, Easy Street, that's all fill of one kind or another. And another story I heard was that this would have been 40 or so years ago. They were working on the Atlantic Cafe back when it was the Atlantic Cafe, and they tore up the floorboards, and there was the harbor. It's that close. And I used to own a business that was on East Chestnut Street between Federal and South Water. And we used to get flooded in the spring because the business was in a basement. And if there was a high tide at the wrong time of the year, we saw it. So given how close to the water you are, I think it's amazing that it hasn't been more of a problem than it is right now. I mean, I don't recall seeing wet rugs on the floor of the main theater or anything like that, but it's, as you well know from growing up in Hull, it's something that's always going to be there, and it's not going to get better.
When the building was rebuilt, I know that team, there were some brilliant minds who were part of that team in that conversation. And this was something they took into consideration when they built the building and the level to which they were able to elevate the back half of the theater. We've never had any flooding in the theater. I should hope, probably not say that out loud.
Knock on wood.
Knock on wood. But they were very strategic in how they designed the building, and we will continue to pivot. We'll continue to adapt in all the ways we can and know how, because this is something facing Nantucket as a whole, and we're going to have to come up with an island-wide solution to what's happening.
Well, it's true, and especially in your part of town, Dreamland's part of town, there are dozens and dozens of buildings that are going to be, or that already are facing this problem. So a piecemeal approach to the problem is not going to work. So I'm confident that somebody's going to figure out something at some point, and that the Dreamland will be here, long after I'm gone. Alicia Carney, thank you for joining me today. I appreciate your taking the time. You've got many more important things to do, and now we'll let you get back to them. But thank you for coming in on the program.
Thank you very much for having me, Charlie. I've enjoyed our conversation very much.
I'm glad to hear that. For Profiles, I'm Charley Walters. Thank you for tuning in. Please join me again.